Hi. This is sort of intimidating, isn't it?
A little, yeah.
We have to be good.
We'll try.
All right, so we'll go to plan B.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. So
Sure.
you were at MassMutual, and I think, MassMutual, as much as any company represents legacy, tradition, and yet you're trying to kind of push some future-looking initiatives. How do you do that with a really established, where people maybe have an expectation? I know what they do. I know who they are. How do you push change?
Yeah, so I'm fairly new to MassMutual.
Okay.
But what I would say, I've been there less than a year. I think one of the misnomers of companies with longevity is that they're stuck in their ways or resistant to change. I actually think companies that have longevity are ones that have to be agile in order to have value long term. And so we exist to serve our policyholders and help them secure their financial security and protect the ones they love. And so with that, we have to meet their changing needs.
Yep.
And that requires constantly changing the status quo, thinking about ways to innovate, use technology in new ways, meet their needs. And so one of the ways that we do that is really foster an environment where people can make mistakes and then they try new things and they experiment, and constantly looking at new ways to bring technology to bear, to bring new solutions to meet their needs.
Let me press on that, because I think a lot of companies talk about tolerating mistakes, creating an environment where it's okay. It's easier to do that on paper than it is. It feels bad to make a mistake. Bosses don't actually always celebrate mistakes. I mean, is there a way to actually make, do you have techniques for actually making that the culture?
Yeah, I think a big piece of the culture, I know even in my groups and the groups I interact with a lot, are whenever we do something, we always say, what could be better, that we could have done differently. So there's like a constant conversation around learning built in that makes it okay to, when you may stumble or when something didn't work as intended, say, how could we do this differently next time? Or what's the learning here we can carry forward?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece of it.
The military is really good at that. We're going to do the postmortem and figure out sort of what happened and how
Power
we
the
improve it.
debrief, yes.
Yeah, do the debrief. So in terms of training leaders, like how is that changing? I mean, we have different expectations, I guess, and different requirements of, or different definitions of what makes a great leader. So how does leader training evolve?
Yeah, I think since the pandemic, I think expectations of employees have changed dramatically, and therefore it makes it even harder for leaders to lead effectively. So I think the pandemic put into perspective for people what was most important to them, either their well-being, how they wanted to spend their time, both personally and professionally, how they wanted to grow. I mean, if you think about the ways that people are working today, most workforces are dispersed. Leaders are now having to introduce new technology to make people more effective and to look at work processes, and employee expectations are so different. So it places a premium on having open conversation, being really clear around expectations, having an inclusive environment, because you tend to have people that are not always together at the same time, and really the power of communication and setting clear accountability and expectations, I think, is key. I think it's a lot harder than it was before.
Yeah, definitely.
Work and life have blended.
Yep.
So coaching becomes super important.
And I think companies are taking into account the well-being of the employee base in different ways. And I guess my question is that something that leaders can be taught to handle effectively, and is that even measurable?
It is. So I think one way that leaders can be taught is to listen to what's most important to the individual. And I think a big piece of how workplaces need to adapt to the needs of their employees right now is to understand employees are all at different stages and they have different needs. So for example, our approach to well-being is intended to be incredibly comprehensive. So we're meeting people at the life stage that they're at, and have offerings that meet that. I'll give you an example. We have a thing called the Wellbeing Wallet, which is a way for every employee, they get a set amount each year to use for however they choose to meet their well-being needs, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or financial. And leaders are encouraged to encourage employees to use their paid time off, think about work flexibly, encourage them to use their benefits, and then understand what's important to them. A lot of it's the power of conversation. And then we measure the effectiveness through health outcomes, through engagement, We ask employees about stress levels, work-life balance, inclusion. So there's measurable ways at the work unit and at the enterprise we can look at it.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about a few things where maybe attitudes or approaches have changed in the last, let's say, a year, 18 months. So the first is sort of hybrid, work from home, work from anywhere. Where I work, we're still not requiring people to come in at all. And really, because we can't finish the sentence, you need to be in the office because, and you can say intangible stuff like, spontaneous, and I believe in that, but I can't really, like for me, people are editors, right, at Harvard Business Review, and they put their head down and work hard. So the idea that they commute 2 hours to come to the office, put their head down and work, it makes no sense. So that's us. Where is MassMutual? Where are you? What is the right approach to this?
So we have an approach to hybrid work. We've had the approach in place for about a year now. So essentially, the majority of our employees are in the office 3 days a week. I think our approach is a bit unique. I actually love it. I wish I could take credit for it, but it was designed before I got there. So there are 2 anchor days and then 1 day of choice a week, either Monday, Thursday. The entire company's work from home on Fridays. And then in addition to that, we have 3 company-wide work from home weeks each year. And then every year, every employee gets 4 weeks to work from anywhere to meet their needs. And compared to our competitors in financial services, it's a bit more flexible.
Yep.
It's a differentiator for us. And I do think there's power in coming together. I mean, I think of it in terms of a variety of different dimensions. There's power in community. There's power in celebrating physically together. There's power in coaching. So when a leader and an employee are having a conversation, I think it's best done in person. And then the piece that nobody really talks about enough is development. Many of the ways that people learn to do different things or observe or they get coaching is by being together. And a lot of colleagues that often are situated together, there's a lot of learning that happens informally and formally that I think we lost the art of during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons why career development is becoming a more important part of the conversation. During the pandemic, employers were focused squarely on running the businesses, rightfully so, employee safety and well-being, and development kind of went by the wayside. And now it's becoming a more important piece of the conversation, as it should be.
Yeah, so talk about that. So what career development is, it's a big reason why people decide to work or to stay at a certain company. What's your, do you have new approaches to that?
We do. It's something that we're spending even more time on now, so our approach is evolving. So I think we're starting from a good foundation. We have a variety of different resources available to all of our employees, whether it be online learning, different learning paths, curriculums, things that are specific to our business and softer skills, and an environment that encourages career movement. I think what has happened during the pandemic, though, at a lot of companies is that because people were working remotely, they tended to communicate in their vertical. And so they developed in their careers in the vertical. And now as groups are working more together, there's an opportunity to think more comprehensively around how the business is run, how pieces of the puzzle fit together. So we're starting to think about both developing curriculum and helping people find kind of purposeful pathways for development. Not just up, but sideways and diagonally. Because at the end of the day, when you're facing complex problems, there isn't a playbook. So having that breadth of experience helps you solve problems more effectively.
Yeah.
And the work becomes more enriching and all of that. But having those open conversations and where people can see the possibility of opportunities is super important. Purpose is so important for people right now. We have a strong purpose-driven culture at MassMutual, but they want to see the ability to make that impact on a greater scale.
A year or two ago, we certainly wrote that the employees had relative power. Or relative leverage, and you had your sort of quiet quitting, and you had your sort of work from anywhere. And has that shifted? And if it I suspect it has to a degree, but has that shifted significantly? And if so, what does that mean? How does if there is that shift, how does that play out? I guess both in terms of attracting and keeping talent, but also in driving a culture.
It shifted a bit in that obviously I think unemployment rates are a bit different than they were. I think recruiting volumes in a number of different industries are down. I think many people would assume that that means you don't have to worry as much, but I think for your best talent, you always need to be focused on recruitment, engagement, development, et cetera. And I think in order to retain the best talent, people want to have that impact, but they need to see the possibilities for growth. So I think, it's the combination of doing multiple things, right? It's the juggling act. Are they engaged? Do they feel included? Do they see a path for development? And are you taking care of me as an employee in terms of my well-being? And that's that delicate recipe. Every employer has to strike the right balance with their business and their culture.
Yeah. And on work from anywhere, I mean, to me in the long term, it is a competitive advantage to companies that allow people to work from anywhere, even though I also believe in the intangibles and all that stuff. But, you sort of said, well, other people maybe in your world, your competitors, are basically requiring people to be in the office,
4 or 5 days.
4 or 5 days a week. So you're not feeling that it's a competitive disadvantage to be where you are in terms of hiring and retaining.
Now. It's working for us right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we're all trying to figure out the answer. So, okay, so
I think everyone's trying to figure it out still, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another question in terms of something that's changed is DE&I.
Yeah.
And, we had a panel of kind of people responsible for DEI initiatives and chief diversity officers and things like that recently. And, there was a feeling that, okay, we're under fire, not sure why, but there seems to be a backlash that maybe can be ignored, maybe can't be ignored, and maybe there are legal reasons why it can't be ignored. How are you interpreting, your role in sustaining DEI initiatives, and to what extent has it changed even the last year?
Yeah. So we've had a strong focus at MassMutual for about 15 years on DE&I, and it's embedded in everything we do. The workplace, the workforce, and how we show up in the marketplace, and we're continuing kind of down that path. There is a lot of noise externally, but we're doing everything in the context of the business strategy and helping meet our customer needs, our policyholder needs, and the communities in which we do business.
Bless you. Sorry.
Bless you.
If somebody sneezes, I have to say bless you. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So in other words, despite the backlash or whatever, the universities, you're actually seeing their numbers of let's say people of color who are admitted are shifting. So there's been a tangible change even last year. But you're saying your policies, there's a through line.
We're staying the course. We're committed overall to, it's an important piece of our culture, and we're focused on inclusion and having our workforce feel they can be their full selves. Yeah. Okay.
So I want to ask you about AI, because we're all thinking about AI and wondering how do we use it, and is it overhyped? Is it underhyped? Where are we exactly? So have you at MassMutual, have you figured out interesting use cases to share with the world, or are you still in an experimental stage?
We're still in the early phases, thinking about how best to use it and doing so responsibly. I think a lot of different companies can use it in different ways to add value. We're thinking of it, can't speak as specifically, like I'm not accountable for how we're using it in some of the business processes, so I'll talk about how we're using it with our employees. And we have a number of pilots going on right now, things like Copilot to make it more effective to people to do their roles, kind of smarter tools that give them the tools they need to focus on their roles in a different way. And the pilots have been successful so far. We're getting good momentum. We're learning from it. We're thinking about ways that we can further incorporate it. But I'd say we're in the early stages, as many companies are, trying to figure out the best way to do it responsibly, to add value, and to impact the work experience in a positive way for our people.
Yeah. So, HBR, we've done a ton of coverage on generative AI, and to the point where we've stopped accepting articles on the kind of theoretical, it could do this, and just we want case studies at this point. There are amazing case studies, in the medical business, in customer service, but not that many, that are sort of generally applicable, and which I'm not saying that the technology is overhyped. I think it's sort of early days, but
it's early days.
Yeah,
I think it has the power and the potential to add value in a lot of different ways, but I think we're so early on. I think people are still figuring it out.
And that sort of gets into the skills that a workforce needs today. I guess I'd be interested in, and not limited to, the ability to prompt ChatGPT, but But how do you think about kind of perpetually reskilling a workforce? Maybe an example is this technology, but in technology.
Yeah. I think in general, we're always looking at ways to have people be more effective in delivering their work. One of the, I think, important elements that I think provides people resilience and longevity in learning is actually agility. The ability to be able to change to changing circumstances, and when there's not a clear rule book, use judgment to kind of figure out how to take a path. And a lot of the problems that companies are facing right now, they're not simple. It's a new frontier, and so you've got to take kind of all those experiences. So agility is one of the things that we look for, we reward, we encourage, and I think it's one of the most important skills from a development standpoint, and the ability to kind of just ride with all the changes in the marketplace, within the company, et cetera.
Which leads us to your own career. Okay,
yes.
So you were in the healthcare industry, right, for a long time.
A long time.
Made the shift. I mean, to what extent are you having to show agility and
Every
adapting
day.
skills? And,
Every second. So I spent 25 years in the healthcare industry. I worked for Cigna for 25 years, had a fantastic journey there, but was ready for a change. So I went from a large publicly traded company to a privately held mutual company. And it's been a great transition. So I started the beginning of this year. And I've coached leaders for years and years on how to make transitions and be agile and everything. So this has been the ultimate test of my coaching ability with myself to make the change. And so MassMutual has been a great transition. I felt good about the company and the leaders and the purpose and everything. But just asking a lot of questions and meeting with as many people as I can and understanding the business model. And it's been a really positive change. And a lot of the lessons and experiences I had in publicly traded are far more transferable than I anticipated I would be. MassMutual runs the business really very effectively, and a lot of governance that mimics what happens in a publicly traded company. So a lot of what I did is highly transferable. So it's been a good transition.
So I think from day one, it's like HBR in the sense that they like to have, practical takeaways. So for this audience, probably mostly HR professionals, love to hear a bit of advice that you've picked up in your career that you think would be valuable, or that you've learned from a mentor or something like that as a takeaway.
I think the most important piece of advice someone gave me kind of early in my career in HR, and I try to live it and role model it each and every day, is we are business leaders first. We just happen to specialize in people. So in every company I've been in and every part of the organization, I've always learned that part of the organization deeply, understood the stakeholders, how we make money, how the environment's changing. And all of the programs or coaching or things I've done have always been in that business context. And it gives you credibility and influence and relevancy, and I think it allows you to measure the impact of the work in a more effective way. So I always say business first.
HR is often an easy, target for criticism. Everyone thinks I could do it better, right?
Yeah.
And you're dealing with people, and people are, people, don't get me started on people. But does HR need to be reinvented, or do you feel like we've evolved to a point where, maybe it's business first and
HR is always evolving. We have to be. I think even the last 5 years, it's been the most difficult time to be in the profession with the pandemic. Unprecedented times, new challenges people never faced, et cetera. And I think it just points to the resilience, the constant learning, thinking about having to deliver value in a new ways. And at the end of the day, it's your workforce that's your competitive advantage in the market. So we have to continue to reinvent ourselves to make the workforce even more effective for the organizations we are part of to be successful.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're out of time.
That went quick.
That went very quickly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, thanks Cindy for her words.
Thank you.
Okay.